And now I've read the Bible many times, like over and over and over, back to back. I've listened to audio Bibles over and over, but this was very different. And I found myself listening to stories I heard like 100 times and saying, "You are insane. How can you?" Like it really came alive. And all I kept thinking was like, God is a storyteller. Forget pen and paper. God is a storyteller. When you take the lives of the people, that God used and He uses, and then you begin to look at their lives from the beginning till whenever they meet Him face to face, it's a story. So I think when it came to Inana, I wanted to write it non-fiction, actually. Now, I'm going to tell you a lot of stories this evening. There's what you call The Intern. Like, it's the Nigerian version of The Apprentice. Many years ago, it came to Nigeria. And because I love all those kind of, shows and all that, when I watched the first episode, the first season, I was so captivating and all that. So when it came, I think for the second season, I can't remember, I really wanted to join. I really wanted to be part of The Intern. And if possibly, maybe even win. So I went, out of everybody in Nigeria came, auditions and all that, we were cut down. We did a lot of interviews, we were cut down. A lot of screening, we were cut down, just like that, until I think we got to the final 20, and then they put us in a boot camp. And one of the things they did was they brought like top industry leaders to come and talk to us about different, like marketing, advertising, education, different mountains of influence, actually. So they'll make the final selections. And I can never forget, they brought someone to talk about branding. And I think that's where I think that's where my love for branding just, and he began to talk. And maybe because at that time in my life, I was going through a very difficult time, a very difficult period. I wasn't happy with who I was, if I want to be very honest. I think I wasn't satisfied with lots of with some decisions I had taken and all that. So I tend to talk fast, so just bear with me. I'll try to slow down, And I was just listening to him, and he started talking about branding, about perception, about reputation. And then he said something. He said, the brand identity, the product or the image itself might be changed, but the identity remains the same. There was a way he put it, and my head just sparked. And while he was talking branding, I was hearing God. Like God was saying, your core might remain the same, but I can change your identity. And I went back home, and maybe a few months later, it wasn't immediately, I started writing, and I wanted to write on branding from the Christian's perspective, how God would start, can take your life and rebrand and make it new and make it beautiful. So I started writing in a kind of, how do I put it, corporate tone. But when I started writing, it started evolving into a novel. Then I'll go back, I'll be like, what am I writing, and then I'll go back again. But it got to a point, I got so caught up in the story, I will find myself crying. And I'll be like, what's going on? I became Inana. And then it just evolved, and I can't even remember where the initial scraps were, because they just didn't make sense. And everything changed. And later I understood that God wanted me to write about branding or rebranding, about changing, rewriting your story in a story form. Let me put it that way. So God is a storyteller. So that's how Inana came about. It wasn't meant to be a story, actually. It was meant to be non-fiction, corporate, business, branding. But it just evolved, and then Inana was born. That's it.
That's amazing. So can you mute when I talk and vice versa so that the echo disappears?
That's fine.
Thank you. But that's amazing. Like, I didn't know this, and I would have never guessed, because reading the story, it sounds like this is somebody's story, right? Like maybe someone came and told you the story, or maybe it was something you went through. And I'm sure you get that a lot. Like, anyone who reads this story is going to say, who is this Inana? What happened? So for you to say that, to give us insight into that, is just amazing, because it really shows just what you said. God is a storyteller. But one thing I like about the story is that even though it has definitely has Christian undertones, right? Strong Christian undertones. And then obviously we know you're a Christian writer. But I didn't exactly see, and I think that that's what made me read it as fast as I did. Because it's almost like you're trying to get to a point. So you actually didn't go the traditional route that faith-based books go. right? You spoke about things that the church and other people are silent about. They shy away from it. They don't talk about it, right? Why did you decide to go that route? But more importantly, were there any repercussions in your faith-based community for, talking about the things that they don't usually talk about?
Yeah, so first of all, it started with a publisher. So I wanted to publish, internationally, the dream of every author. So I started to write my synopsis and send to different publishing houses. And I remember it got to a publisher, the synopsis, and it was like, send me some chapters. So I sent him some chapters, and it was like, would you like us to sign you on? And I was like, oh, I was so excited. And he said, send me the whole manuscript. So I sent the whole manuscript, and he was like, it's very gripping. But he made a statement. He said, it's too hot for Christian publishers. And I was like, okay, I understood where he was coming from. Because Inana, I think one word for Inana is actually raw. It's very raw. It's not coated. It's not sugar coated. It's not Christianese. It's not religious. It's just raw. And I want to say maybe God wanted me to write that way. When I was writing Inana, I'm a Christian. I was born into a Christian home. I grew up in the church. I grew up going to church. So obviously I was thinking everything Christian. But when I started writing Inana, I became a very different person. And I remember one day going to church and sitting down, and I became, oh God, it was scary. A man and his wife, pregnant wife, came and sat in front of me. And I looked at them and thought, why is he faking? I'll just do like this and he will just fall. Seriously. Why is he faking? That's the way all men behave. It was almost like I was possessed. And when that feeling lifted, I understood how Inana thought. Inana wasn't a Christian. She wasn't born into a Christian home. I want to even say sort of she was even possessed, because when God had to clean her up, a lot of things had to leave her. So she wasn't thinking Christian. She wasn't acting Christian. So if I'd written it from a Christian perspective, from a Christian girl's perspective, it would just be wanna be. It wouldn't make sense per se. It would be like someone trying, like when you watch some movies like that, trying to be like Christian. You have to forget you are a Christian without losing who you are inside. And I'm hoping that makes sense. Some years ago, I got on Facebook. I think when I just got on Facebook many years ago. And because I love writing, I began to add different people because of the way they wrote. I was so captivated. Then I remember one day sitting back and talking to my sister, and I told her, why is it that most of the people who captivate me, they're not Christians? No, thank God, because there's been a change. I mean, right now. But at that time, the people who were really catching my interest and keeping it, they were not Christians. Now, they were not writing anything maybe raunchy or bad, but they were just secular, And then she made a statement. She said, because there are no filters. And I was like, that is it. I think, especially as a writer, or maybe as a writer in any genre, whether screen, whether content or anything, there's a tendency when you say you're a Christian to put a lead over your creativity. So, yes, so I noticed that if you want to get into, hey, let me say this, so before they'll say I'm talking, if you want to get into the God zone, you have to remove the lead of religion. That's the only way I can describe it. Because you have to break through something, break through a mindset, break through a way of thinking like, oh, I'm a Christian, so this has to be Christian, this has to be godly. Excuse me. But when you understand that God has different expressions, you cannot say you want to act the part of a prostitute and tie a wrapper. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Now, I'm not saying you should have to get naked, but I think religion actually puts a lead on your creativity. And I think with Inana, there was no lead. So that's why it came out like it punches you in the face, it grabs your heart. I mean, I'm the writer, but Inana does something to me. And I'm nothing. It does something to me, And I think it's because there was no lead, So of course, when some people read it, but funny enough, most Christians who read it, they were like, oh, it's very fine. That's what's going on. I think because the church is more tolerant now, we're now talking more of things that were covered years back, Sexual abuse is on, people go through it a lot. Rape, physical abuse, emotional abuse. A lot of women go through these things. In the past, they were covered, but right now, everybody's talking about it. Domestic violence, everybody's talking about it. There's nothing hidden anymore. So I think right now, oh, sure, there are some, oh, it's too dark. Some people say it's too dark, some it's too raw. But I think about 98% of people, Christians included, said it was very okay. Said it was very okay. And then, oh,
Well, I'm part of the people who think that it was very okay, and I think that it was very necessary
thank you.
because the book talked
Thank
about
you.
all kinds. Thank you. Okay, so can you just, so that we get away with the echo, sorry, just in case, and you can confirm if it's still echoing, if people can, listeners, let us know if it's still echoing. If not, let's just keep doing the muting on each side. But I'm definitely one of those who thought it was very okay. So I remember when you sent me this book and it's signed by you, so I was like, oh, this is so cute. My prayer partner sent me a book. But I took my time to read it because I thought, oh, another Christian book. And to be honest, I'm not, obviously I am a Christian. I have my days and my the books that I have the headspace for when I have the headspace for it. So I kind of took my time and I was like, oh, you know what? I'll take this book with me on holiday. And I thought, oh, it would just be easy reading, like a Christian book. But like I said, I didn't sleep the whole flight because I was reading this book. Like, even when they turned off the thing, I put the light on to be like, I have to finish this book, right? It was riveting because it didn't do what you said it would do. It didn't do the Christianese thing. It didn't cover up. It didn't do the filter. So traumas like child sexual abuse, abandonment, rejection, betrayal, loss of parents, physical abuse, verbal abuse. They were all the catalysts that set up the trajectory of Inana's life. And this is what we've been talking about, over the past 5 days. All the things that can affect a teenager's transition to adulthood and the things that you can carry along with you because of the things that you have gone through. So day one was definitely, very deep on this because it was navigating teenage trauma. For those who missed it, you can catch the replay on our YouTube page. That's Teenagers Formative Academy on YouTube. And while you're on there, why don't hit the subscribe button so that you can get notifications every time we have a new video up. Now, Debbie, can I ask you, can you speak to how she was able to overcome this plethora of traumas without giving away too much of the book?
Yes. Simply put, Inanna met Jesus. That's just it. Now, there are times when I talk about certain topics, and there's some that really get me emotional. I was talking to teenagers in my church, I think, last week. We had a retreat, a midterm retreat with them. And we're talking about identity, funny enough. And then as we're talking, and they wanted to know, how do you get your identity? And the truth of the matter is, you cannot get your identity outside God. I can give you all the self-help, motivational, psychotherapy. The bottom line is you need God to get your identity. So Inanna was able to overcome all these things because, simply put, she met Jesus. And when she met Jesus, when she met God, he showed her who she really was. She thought she was fine. And we see that a lot with many people, teenagers included, who have been through a lot of trauma, who have been through different things. They feel they're fine. Or even when they talk about it like, they wear a badge. I was abused, or, that kind of thing. I've been through hell and high water, and as I came out. But you don't know how damaged you are until you get into certain situations. I remember speaking with a brother of mine some years back, and he was saying something. He said, do you know that? Because I stayed with someone who was sort of, let me use the word abusive, rather abusive, although I don't think the person meant to be abusive, but the person was abusive, And he said, and I was like, I'm fine. He said, you think you're fine. It's when you leave that environment and get into a neutral place, you're not fine. And that's exactly what happened. So most people think, oh, I'm fine. I guess what I'm saying. Until they get into situations or they meet a person who triggers certain things. And they go like, what's this? What's coming out of me? Or worse, they find themselves behaving exactly like those who abused them in the past. And I'm not necessarily talking about sexual abuse. So if you were physically abused or you're emotional abused or verbally abused, you find yourself maybe later on saying the same things, acting the same way, like the other. You might want to excuse it, but the truth of the matter is you're acting that way because you've not healed. And I'm going to sound like a broken record. It's only Jesus who can do this. So what happens is Inana meets him, and then he reveals to her everything that was inside her. Because most times we don't know what's inside of us. As I said, until we get into certain situations. So she met him. That's how she was able to overcome it. Like basically, I can't even say any other thing like that. And then she allowed him to work on her. Now I'm saying this because it's possible to even meet him or have an encounter with God and not allow him. I think the whole Christian journey is a walk of faith, and some processes can be very hurtful and it can also take time. You need to allow God to work on you. I'm trying not to give away so many people that. But when she met him, and then he began to take her through the different rooms, I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. There are certain rooms she didn't want to go into. And that's what happens with us. When we meet Jesus, so for those who have been through things, look, just meet God first. Just meet Jesus. Forget Christianism, forget religion. Let me just talk to you. Just meet Jesus first of all. Just be with him. Just give yourself over to him. And then allow him work on you. Allow him walk you through process. If he needs to take you back, allow him take you back. Do you understand? But really, the way she was able to overcome all these things because she met him. Meeting him was the starting point, and then he began to walk in her and on her. So honestly, meeting Jesus, and then luckily she was also able to meet the right people. I think I'll talk about that later. For the right people, meeting the right people is very, very essential in overcoming trauma.
Yes, it definitely is and was. And just for the people who are listening and thinking, oh, just meet Jesus, trust me, the way she met him is not the way you think. So in the book, I love, Debbie, I have to say, I love your writing style. It was so intriguing. Like, what you think you know, you don't really know until you keep going. So when she said she met Jesus, she didn't just like go to church and have like an encounter. No, right? It was very interesting, and I'm not going to give it away. You have to buy and read the book Inana to know how she met Jesus and how the journey to her healing went. And I loved how you spoke about identity. Yesterday's topic was definitely about that. We had Chimamaka Ige talk to us. The topic was, who are you really? But the core of it was identity. And you've just reiterated some of the things that she says. You cannot find your identity outside of the one who created you. A manufacturer is who knows what they manufactured and knows everything about it. So if anything is spoiled or lost, you take it back to the manufacturer. So definitely, there's an identity thing there. One of the things that we've mentioned, and so you know it's a real thing, and it's also a topic that was touched upon quite deeply in the book, was child sexual abuse. Now, we may shy away from it, but this is something that has staggering, and I mean staggering statistics in real life. Now, we can look at the statistics from the societal point of view, but then also as Christians, we also understand that there's an agenda in the kingdom of darkness to subvert destinies of strong people who are in the army of the Lord from when they are children, right? So that is why one of the topics or one of the courses that we have in the academy is actually focused on dealing with sexual abuse. Debbie is the tutor of that course. The course isn't up yet. However, we have courses that are up. And for now, we have the Cultivating the Fruits of the Spirit suite, which is made up of 8 courses that you can have access to now for free for the next 1 month. So we've just launched the website, the learning management system, where you can go in, register, and take these courses at your leisure. So it's a very flexible learning management system. You can pick a course, watch maybe 10 minutes today, come back, create your own diet. but then you would go through different things that are different courses by different amazing tutors, which are designed to not only renew but also transform your mind. And try and what the beauty of these things is that everything we've talked about and everything that you've probably encountered as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult, even as an adult today, stems from the things that have gone awry. And how do you correct it? You correct it from inside. Now, the fruit of the Spirit suite is one that I would definitely recommend to everyone, because it takes all the things that are that need to be your innate, that need to form your innate character: love, joy, peace, patience, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. All these things are the fruits of the Spirit, and you understand why you need them in your everyday life when you take that course, because we really bring it to the core of it. We don't teach it how the church teaches it. We teach it in practical terms and give you practical applications for cultivating those fruits in your everyday life. So I would strongly encourage you, go to the website www.tiffany.com and register for the freemium package. It gives you access to the Fruit of the Spirit suite for 1 month only. After that, we'll have the membership tiers, which you can register for and have access to all the suites. So the segue was from the fact that dealing with sexual abuse is actually one of the courses that is taught by Debby, and I think that is something that every single teenager, whether you've dealt with it, whether you know someone who's dealing with it, there are practical tips that you can take away. But much more than that, get the book Inana. Trust me, this book is worth a space in your library, because it's not something you're going to read once and forget about it. No, you're going to, like I said, I keep going back to it. The author says that she keeps going back to it and even gets emotional. The story is told like none that you've heard before. And I don't know if you know, but we also have a podcast. Teenagers Formative Initiative is the overarching initiative. This is where the Teenagers Formative Academy comes from. But then we also have the Share My Experience podcast, where we deal with and we unpack teenage trauma. So everything that is covered in the book Inana, all the traumas that we mentioned, are in some way or shape or form touched on in the podcast series. So there are stories, right? Stories about real people, fictional people. Like Debby said when she started, God is a storyteller. So it's one of God's many stories. So it'll touch on the issues, but at the end you get practical tips on how to overcome these issues. So if you haven't already, you can follow us at Share My Experience Pod here on Instagram, or Share My Experience Podcast on YouTube. And you can find us on any of the podcatchers: Spotify, Amazon, Google Podcasts, anywhere. Subscribe, listen to them, and get some knowledge. What I was asking was for practical tips, for people who have gone through these traumas. How can they truly rewrite their stories? I know you spoke about, them meeting Jesus and their lives being transformed, and that's fine, right? But it's a journey. But then how do the people, after their whole spiritual experience, how do they in real life, move forward? With any practical tips that you can give, how can people really truly rewrite their stories?
Okay. And now maybe, okay, that's where we will always have an issue. I think I have many Christians when they say, okay, now let's leave the spiritual. And I'm, for crying out loud, the spiritual controls everything. There's certain things I might not be able to share because, but when I look at my life and how God has brought me, and trust me, God has brought me through a lot. It's really because of the spiritual. It's really because of the spiritual. Apart from the facts, I was a Christian, but then he had to take me through. Guess things he did was bring the right people around on that a bit. You will need therapy. You might need therapy, but the people you might talk to might not necessarily be professionals or certified, in quotes. They might just be people God would lead you to so you can experience, like, should I use the word, a catharsis? So you can vent, so you can just be empty. Let me use that word, because when you go through a lot of things, trauma in whatever form, you tend to internalize things, you tend to build up, you tend to accumulate a lot of things that you might not even be aware of, might be there. So you know that you're feeling off, you know you're not feeling comfortable, you know you're not yourself. Or on the outside, you might be Deborah, you might be Muki or whoever, but you're not just yourself, you're not at optimum level, let me use that word. And it's because of what you've been through. So most of the time, God will bring you through somebody who is able to recognize and then pull out those things from you. In my third year in school, I went through a lot. And it got to a point where I couldn't talk to God. Now, at the stage I am in right now, with age and in my God walk, yes, I'm going to say this. Muki, God is more than enough. Anyway, let's not go. So, as you say, let's not go spiritual. God is everything.
No, 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 no. No, don't get me wrong. I didn't say let's not go spiritual. So after giving the spiritual, I always like to give practical tips as well, so that people will know, won't think that they are failing. Because like you and I know, in our spiritual journey, there are times when we can be, feeling so whatever. Other times we're like, God, are you here? Are you here? Right? So this is really about things that you can just use to be sure that you are still on that journey, if you know what I mean. So don't get me wrong. I didn't say leave spiritual. Spiritual, like you said, controls the physical. Like we can't do anything. We're actually spirit beings that are having a physical experience. It's not vice versa, you see. So please don't get me wrong. Definitely speak about the spiritual. But what I'm really after is also practical tips. You mentioned therapy, and that's good because I don't know if you know, but there are some Christians that will say you don't need therapy. All you need is God, right?
Okay, now I'll digress a bit and then I'll come back. Now, when people say you don't need therapy, all you need is God, in a way, I understand where they're coming from. Maybe because, and I'll say this, at this age where I am and in my God walk now, if I'd gone through what I'd gone through then, I would have dealt with it alone with God. Because maybe because now I've gone through a lot with God and I found out really that God is all I need to my emotional need. God is the El Shaddai. He's the multi-breasted one. He's everything. And He's everything. So if you need a therapist, God is there. God has helped me through when you're having, God has been there. So I wouldn't want to drag that. So in a way, I understand where they're coming from. But because many people have not, because many people maybe don't really know that yet, one of the most helpful things will be therapy. But I would say this, please talk to a person who is a Christian. Because I found that people who are not Christians, they might come from a place of love, but they might give you advice that's not in the long run beneficial to you. In my third year in school, I went through a lot, and I needed to talk to somebody, and it was so bad that I was like I was sleeping in the night, and my roommates would tell me that I would be grinding my teeth. Okay, so later I heard that was a PTSD sign. I'll be grinding my teeth as I sleep. So I'll wake up and I couldn't talk to anybody because a lot of things had been through. And so I went back home and I kept telling God, I need to talk to somebody. 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 So I go home. And then on my birthday, I forget it. I was with my sister in the kitchen. She's late now, my immediate elder sister. I was with her in the kitchen. And just as she was cooking and all that. So I just began to talk haltingly at first, just little by little about certain things I'd been through, things that happened in school. And I just started talking and started talking and started talking and started talking. And for 4 hours, I was talking. And she didn't say a word. She would be cutting, for example, cutting vegetables, and I was just talking. I was just talking. Then she might go to the bathroom, and I'll just follow her. She didn't say anything, and I was just talking. Looking back now, I don't even know what happened, but I think it was an answer to prayer. And I was just talking and talking and talking and talking. For 4 hours, I was talking non-stop. And then when I was done, I kept quiet. And then I heaved a sigh. And I went to the bathroom, sat on the bathtub, and I began to cry. And then she came into the bathroom, and she saw me, and then she began to cry. And it was as if everything I'd accumulated just came out with the talking. I was so empty. Like, I was so empty. And when I was done, I cried, she cried, and I went to my room and I slept. I slept as if I had not slept for a week. And when I got up, I was very fine. So, in addition to the God thing, you need people who will really listen to you. Because I find out that if you're able to talk, I think many people just give advice, they cut you. And healing is a process. So I think that's why therapy is very good, because you're talking to somebody who has the time to listen or who would listen to you. So you're just talking and venting. But I think when you talk to people who love you, even though they love you, they don't allow you go through that process of really talking, because sometimes you might not even know what you're talking about. You just know you just want to say something. So maybe it's almost like what you've been through, the pain, the hurt, is hidden underneath a lot of externals. So you're just talking like you're trying to untangle, It takes someone who is very astute, someone who is very patient to be able to like allow you. Do you understand? Like to be able to just let her talk. Most people just be like, no, don't feel like that now. It's fine. Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. Have you prayed about it? Or, just talk to me. No, or they'll give you advice. Although you don't. But I think for therapy, I think one of the things, in addition to the God thing, you need to talk to somebody. So going back to the God thing again, like one of the things that really helped me now currently, and then after that was I began to talk to God a lot. There was time I was in my room for 3 months. I had an accident, had to get surgery, and I faced the wall and all that. And I was talking to God constantly. And when I was done at the end of 3 months, I was a very different person. And that's when I knew that God was enough. I was talking to him constantly. So I think if you can if you can't get if you can't get a therapist or someone to really talk to, I think you just spend time with God in prayer. And I mean that. Spend time, pray for those listening, I don't know if you can pray in the spirit. It is so helpful. I think that even cuts down because it goes to the very core of it. So that many times you just want to go into God's presence and then you want to start with, oh God, she hit me, she abused me and everything. But what you really need to go to is, I hate the way she talked about my mother, but you might not be aware of that. So once you just get into God's presence and then begin to pray in the spirit and you're going through everything, he just goes to the core of it. And once he removes that thing, every other thing falls out. So that's one of the reasons why I talk about talking to God a lot. Pray in the spirit if you can. Pray in the spirit. Get therapy. Spend time in the word. Spend time in prayer. More than anything, allow God to write your story. And I want to say this in this manner. Now, the enemy, when you went through all those abuse things, the devil was trying to write your story. That's the truth. So life was trying to write your story. But when you give yourself over to God, give him the pen, let him write it. So what happens is when you give God the pen, he begins to take you on a very different tangent from what the enemy planned. So he's writing a very, very different story from what you initially started. So let's assume the enemy planned, okay, she's going to be verbally abused, then she's going to be sexually abused, and then at the end, she might become battered, shattered, she might become a femme fatale, become an Inana, and then in the end, she dies out of strangers or something. So when you bring God into the picture, what happens is he changes your story and then he begins to write your end. So in the end, what happens? You're now like the victor instead of the victim. So she meets God, and then what happens? She now begins to speak on behalf of abuse. She's now well known, that kind of thing, because you allowed God to write your story. And it's very easy. See, I don't know if you read Tzedekah before, Blink. I don't know if you read that book many years ago. If you have, it's an amazing book. Tzedekah read the book on Blink, and I'll just summarize this. It's of a guy, a very intelligent guy who is able to see into the future, but not in the form of like prophecy. He just has flashes. For example, he's going on the road and then he sees a tree fall in the middle of the road, and then a car comes and smashes into the tree. Then that flash disappears. So when he opens his eyes, nothing is going on. About 2 minutes later, a tree actually falls, in the middle of the road, and then a car comes and just like he sees it, smashes into the tree. And so he began to go on. So he began to know things that were happening. But then something strange happened. He met, I think, a priest or a Christian, something like that. And the person brought him to just talk to him about God and all that. And then, all these mafia guys were looking for him. And then he began to run. And then something strange happened. He got into a tight corner. And then he just prayed, God help me. And once he just made that prayer, the flash he had just dissolved into 7 different options. What I mean is, if he saw in a flash that a man was coming with a gun and there was nowhere to run to, once he made the prayer, the scene changed. Can you hear me? The scene changes, and then he sees that someone comes and distracts the man with the gun, and then he sees another scene where the gun falls into, the gutter. He sees another scene where the guy, like 7 different scenes because of the prayer he made. I don't know if I'm making sense. In other words, yes, so that prayer just changes. Exactly, just changes the trajectory of what should have been without prayer. Just that, or what should have been without the God factor. So like it's when we talk about the God factor, and I can't even like overemphasize this. It's just like even when it comes to, okay, what do I need to do, Father? In all your ways, God is so absolute about absolutes. If it says in all your ways, okay, Father, I've been through a lot. How do I heal? He might tell you go on Google. That's why I can't even start from anywhere else. He might say go on Google. Then go on Google. I guess what I'm saying. And then you find out, oh, this is what. And then from there, he says, okay, go and see this particular therapist. It starts from the acknowledging the God factor. Do you understand? So I can give you things like talk to people, do this, go out, have fun, help people. I find out that because I've been through those things, usually they're temporary. They just help you for a short time. But God goes into your very core. He deals with, I'm going to sound the word here, Mookie. God deals with your past. Now, God cannot be contained with time. So most of the time, we always see God dealing with us from the present into the future. But one of the things I've learned, God can actually go into your past. So before I see the Mookie's like, God can actually go into your past. God can actually walk with you during the process when you were being abused or anything. Then he comes now and goes into your future. I can't explain more than that. So one of the things I've learned is therapy without God, self-help, motivational, encouragement without God can help you for a short time. But why I always bring the God factor, because I've seen and I've experienced that, and people have also said it, God goes to the very roots. He deals with the processes. He deals with the past. He deals with what the enemy might be planning, but more than anything, he deals with the spirits involved. Because whether or not we accept it, there are spirits involved with these things. When you go through trauma, there's a spirit attached to you, to that particular thing. If it was sexual abuse, there's a spirit of either perversion, there's a spirit of molestation, there's a spirit of low self-esteem attached to it. You cannot shake off spirits with therapy. You cannot shake off spirits with motivation. No, you cannot, because these are spirits. Do you understand what I'm saying? There was time I experienced, I had the spirit of fear. I didn't even know I had the spirit of fear because of certain things I'd been through. And then I went to school, I got baptized in the Holy Spirit in my first year. I sat down, I think I've shared this before, and I had to rebuke the spirit of fear because it held me back from experiencing all God had for me. And I felt something leave me and walk out the door, past the bunks in the hostel and walk out the door. Do you understand? So anytime I say the God thing, yes, I can't forget it. Spirits are real. So once you go through, and you open up yourself, that's why I hate the devil. When you go through things that are intensely emotional, things that are intensely, they enter your soul. What happens is your soul is opened up. So spirits easily come in. And that's what the devil wants. That's why you need to be very, very careful with what you watch, what you listen to. Because when you're at the height of the movie, you can easily be possessed. When you're at the height of the music, you can easily be possessed. So that's why it's the same thing. When you're in the spirits, when you're like maybe in a worship atmosphere, I guess that place, that's a high peak. It's like something just comes into you. I was listening to, sorry, I'm just going like this, but we'll soon be done.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I was watching Dusi Oyeko, and that's true. The outpouring is on. But anyways, I was watching Dusi Oyeko, some time ago, and then he was talking about, he was just this normal thing he does, this music thing he does in Abuja and Lagos, and I was watching it, and I noticed he was so in the spirit, and Dusi can be very expressive. That's the word I want to use. If you don't know him, you'll be looking like, what's wrong with this guy? And then it was so intense. Even in my room, I was like, oh my God, I could feel God and the whole atmosphere. And so he faced the wall, and then he began to act like a drunk person. And then live chat, and someone said, please, someone gets an ambulance. The person, actually thought something was wrong with him. Please, someone hold him. You guys are still singing. There's something wrong with him. Please hold him, please. The person was so concerned, you know. But there's a peak you can get to with spirits, and the enemy is also aware of this. Now, the spirit can either be good or bad, you know, where you're either so emotional or so spiritual, you know, and then spirit attached to you. So it's easy to get filled with the Holy Spirit in a place of intense worship, and it's easy to get easily possessed in a place of intense demonic, you know, songs or movies or anything, you know, that kind of thing. So what do you do for those who need go back to God? I know Mookie's like, I want practical stuff. Mookie, oh my God, can you? I just
you said it all, to be honest. No, you actually have said it all. I don't know why you're second guessing me or thinking I'm on your side here, then we're on the same side. That's why you are on this post, you are on this chat with me. So no, don't say you think I feel like you have answered this question. You have even given some definite insight that people need to even go and check. Because some of the examples that you've given, people can probably relate to and you know, check themselves. So definitely you have answered the question. Thank you very much. And again, we are on the same side.
Yeah, I know.
Yes. So that's great. So thank you so much for this. I mean, we've obviously overshot the time, but then that's because of all the technical issues that we've had. But I want to thank you so much for just coming and sharing. I feel like we need to have you on the podcast one day soon. I mean, yeah, it will be very, 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 it'll be amazing and cathartic to have an episode where we just really dig deep, because you've touched on the surface of some of these things, but I feel like taking that whole healing piece and just really drilling deep down into it will really help a lot of people. So hopefully you'll be open to coming on the podcast sometime soon. But thank you so much for sharing today. There's so much that we can take away, unpack, and build up on, you know, and just rewrite our stories at the end of the day, because I don't think there's anybody that's going to say that they haven't been through some form of trauma or the other. So this is very, very useful. This conversation has been very useful in helping, you know, first of all, the navigation and then the journey to really healing. So thank you for taking the time out to talk to us today. God bless you richly, and hopefully we'll see you on the podcast one day.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone who's watching. You can catch this on the rebroadcast after it has been heavily edited. Well, have a wonderful day. God bless you. Good night.
And get some practical tips on how to